Maxey from outside. Sixers lead, courtesy of Tyrese Maxey.
Deep to left field, going back is Locastro. It is gone!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, as always, continuing on with our college football preview series today. Hammering some SEC teams this week. In today's episode, a team I'm super excited to talk about and touch on because I will actually be going to my first ever SEC game this fall. I'll be traveling down to Knoxville, Tennessee, to watch the Tennessee Vols take on the Kentucky Wildcats the beginning of November, first Saturday of November, a night game too. So it's going to be an awesome experience. Really looking forward to it. So Tennessee is a team that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on heavily throughout the year, and a team that I think is going to be really exciting. I do think the future is still brighter than the present for this team, at least, especially ushering in this new stud quarterback that they're going to have that we'll talk about. But I think the Tennessee football future is very bright, and I do think a solid year is coming in. This year, they're going to be a top 25 team, I would assume, when the poll comes out early next week. But this is a team that expectations are to compete for SEC championships, compete for playoff berths. I mean, beating kind of the same drum with a lot of these teams that we're talking about, but that's what these fan bases expect. That's kind of the difference between – I think the biggest difference that I've noticed from talking about college football more than the NFL, like, all right, when you're the Texans or the Lions and give it up for them, they had great years last year, both won playoff games. Like, the fan base isn't really expecting that. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's the accomplishment, being able to do that. Now it's kind of the expectation, all right, go do some more. But when it comes to college football, like, you have such a slim margin for error where it's like, all right, if you're not 11-1, 12-0 in the past, it's different now with the expanded playoff, but you're not really living up to the hype of your fan base. Like, you only get 12 games to prove that you deserve to be in the top four. Now that expands to 12, but Tennessee is one of those teams. They won national championships in the past. They've dominated the SEC in the past. But it's been a long time since then. They were able to go 11-2 back in 2022. It took a bit of a step back last year, but I do think the future is very bright on Rocky Top, and I'm excited to go and be able to experience it myself. But we'll get into the preview of the entire team here right now. When you look at the head coach, Josh Heupel, 27-12, entering year 4 at Tennessee, 27-12 through his 3 years. 55-20 in his 6 years as a head coach. That includes his time as a head coach at UCF, and I think he's the right man for the job. Certainly, he's proven to be a good recruiter. He's able to bring in Nico, this young stud quarterback. He chose him. Nico chose to come play for Heupel at Tennessee, and an offensive mastermind, former Oklahoma quarterback. This guy has been around the block, playing experience, coaching experience, and I think he is the right man for this Tennessee job going forward. Runs a great offensive system that's really exciting, and we saw in 2022, when you have the right pieces in place, how good and how effective that offense can be. When you look back at the Tennessee season last year, 2023, as I said, took a bit of a step back from 2022, but still a pretty strong year. And I think if Tennessee has a similar year this year, fans would be all right with that because of playing such a young kid at the quarterback spot. But 9-4 last year, 3-3 in the SEC, and a pretty balanced squad. And I think that's a good kind of indication of going forward of what these great teams do. I mean, you look at Michigan last year, offense, defense, they were dominant on both sides of the ball. Alabama, historically, offense, defense, both sides of the ball dominant. Georgia, we think defense, but the offense has been really good over these past few years as well. Tennessee had a really solid average, balanced. Average isn't the right word, but more of a balanced year on both sides of the ball. Ranked 50th and above in the 4 major offensive categories of total offense, scoring offense, rushing offense, passing offense. 36 or higher in 3 of the 4. And they're ranked 65th and above in the 4 major defensive categories. Same thing, scoring, total defense, passing defense, rushing defense, and they ranked in the top 32 in 3 of the 4. So they weren't overwhelmingly great on offense, weren't overwhelmingly great on defense, but pretty balanced. And I think the goal is to, continue to build that to where they're both really balanced in the consistently in the top 15 to 20 in those categories and racking up double-digit win seasons every single year. They won their bowl game 35-0 against Iowa with Nico at the quarterback spot. You might wonder why, if you're not a Tennessee fan or you're not a college football diehard and you're just trying to learn a little bit more. I'm not even going to bother saying his name. I'll try it right now. But Nico Amaleva, I believe is how you say it, but a crazy last name. And I assume all broadcasts, and anytime you hear people talk about him this year, they're just going to refer to him as Nico. So just get used to me saying it. But he played the bowl game. They won 35-0 against Iowa. This Tennessee team, 2 last year, scored 35 or more in 6 of their games. They also held their opponents to 20 or less in 7 of their games. And as I said, real balanced team last year, not too reliant on one side of the ball. And I think that's a sign of success and something they can certainly build on, because you can't just be focused on going out there and scoring 45, 50 points a game each every week if you're Tennessee, because that's when you run into great defenses like they did Georgia 2 years ago, and they were able to shut them down and they had no chance. So you have to be able to be balanced on both sides of the ball. I think it's a good foundation to keep building on. And as I said, I think expectations this year should be in that 8, 9, 10 win, depending on if they can make it to the playoff or not, or what bowl game they go to. But 8, 9, 10 wins, I think, should be the expectation. And for next year to maybe even be, a better year where Nico really kind of takes off. And this is more of the lay the groundwork, lay the foundation year. But we'll see. And he could go out there and exceed expectations. But we'll get into a deep dive of the offense now. Only returned 5 starters on that offense from last year. Joe Milton moves on at quarterback. Certainly had his moments. That first game against Virginia was a pretty awesome performance by him. I remember watching that week 1 last year. And, he's known for his arm strength, some of the crazy flashy throws that he made, but just not a real good overall quarterback, more of a prospect than a finished product. And he never was really able to put it all together. So now you slide in a new quarterback with Nico, and I think the offense is going to take a step up from what they did last year. But the offense last year ranked 36 in scoring at 31.8 points per game, 19th in total offense, even with some quarterback issues at 448.1 yards per game, 9th in rushing offense at 204 yards per game, and only 50th in passing at 243 yards per game. Like I said, I expect those numbers to climb with Nico rather than Milton. And we already alluded to this at the beginning, but in 2022, the Tennessee offense under Heupel led the country in scoring average with 46.1 points per game. I expect Tennessee to be closer to that than the 31.8 they put up last year. I think that's realistic expectations. This team will be within 38 to 40 points per game as long as Nico stays healthy. With the up-tempo offense that Heupel runs, it's a tough cover. So Nico, former 5-star recruit, had 4 touchdowns in that Citrus Bowl game against Iowa last year, 3 rushing, 1 passing, and they were one of the top defenses in the country last year. So for a guy that didn't really play the entire season, besides in some spot minutes, to be able to go out there and kind of pick apart this Iowa team was an impressive feat, and definitely gives Tennessee fans and the coaching staff, and as well as his teammates, a lot of optimism going forward. This offense, plain and simple, just gets dudes open. Nico just has to be able to put the ball where it needs to be and get the ball to his guys in space, because they got some playmakers and some speed, and this offensive scheme is just built really to have guys kind of running free. Not many reads, not the most complex offense, but kind of just a see it, throw it type of thing. So Nico is in a great spot, a really quarterback-friendly spot, and he certainly has the talent to be one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football this year. Dylan Sampson will be the lead back for this Tennessee squad. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry last year. He was another guy who had a star performance in that Citrus Bowl game, had 133 yards against Iowa. And in the first game of the season, he had 4 touchdowns against Virginia as well. So he gave the Vols fans, him and Nico in the Citrus Bowl game against Iowa, a good look at the future and who's going to be kind of leading the way in the backfield this year. Heupel is really excited, from what I've heard and read, about the depth of the receiver room. One of my favorite players in all of college football, and one of the most electric and just fun players in college football, and the coolest name, I think, as well. Wide receiver Squirrel White leads the way. Led the team had 67 catches last year, and is just a super exciting receiver. He's a guy that gets screens. He could beat you deep. He's a we talked about it in the USC preview, but like a Zachariah Branch type of player where kind of just get the ball in his hands anyway, and he's going to find a way to make a play. Chris Brazzell is a transfer from Tulane. He's like a 6'5", above the rim, power forward type of receiver. And then Brew McCoy had a really good year 2 years ago, and then last year got hurt. He's back this year, and Dante Thornton is another weapon to be excited about for this Tennessee offense. This team goes 3 to 4 receivers on the field constantly, likes to really spread it out. So these are guys that all are going to have big roles. The O-line returns 3 starters as well, and they bring in a left tackle transfer from LSU and Lance Hurd. So a lot of exciting pieces on this offense to certainly be bullish about, and already with a great offensive coach and a great offensive system there with Josh Heupel, plenty of optimism and reason to be excited for this Tennessee Vols offensive squad. The defense, when you look at it from last year, 22nd in scoring, 32nd in total defense, 19th in rushing defense. So really solid there across the board, upper echelon type of numbers, but struggled against the pass. They ranked only 64th. But I do think nationally this was an underrated group from last year. But they do only bring back 2 starters. Those 2 starters, defensive end James Pierce Jr. and defensive tackle Omari Thomas. Pierce, however, is a guy that is in the mix to be the number 1 pick. He's viewed as probably the best pass rusher in the entire country. He had 10 sacks last year. So that certainly helps if you're going to bring back 2 players, and that's one of them. That's a big thing because he's the building block. He might be the SEC defensive player of the year with the potential that he comes back with. The defensive line is really viewed as the strength of this team. A lot of guys that have played a lot of snaps in some big boy football games, and headlined by Thomas and Pierce there returning. This should be one of, if not the best defensive line in the entire SEC is what the talk has been. Last year's leading tackler, though, linebacker Elijah Herring, left for the portal after spring ball. So that leaves this team with a bit of a hole in the middle of the defense, a hole that they weren't really expecting they needed to plug when the season ended last year. So that's a pretty big hole in the middle that they're going to have to be able to, compensate for it. And the defensive line and their ability should hopefully help that, blow up some more plays at the line of scrimmage and make plays easier on the linebackers. But the defensive line has to show up. It can't all be on the linebackers in the middle of the field, but I am worried about that group in coverage there as well. And the secondary was the weak point of the defense last year, ranked 64th against the pass, which, isn't terrible, but you want to be, that's about average with about 134 teams, a little bit above average there in the secondary. So when the secondary is a weak point and then you lose a lot of guys, they lost 11 players from last year's secondary, either to the NFL or the portal. That's a big loss. So whether or not you want to look at it as a positive of kind of cleaning house and ushering in some new faces to help revamp a group that struggled a little bit last year, you can look at it that way, or just think, all right, maybe those guys could have taken a step up this year. They're ushering in a complete new group of guys. It's going to take a lot of time to get these guys accommodated, and you don't really have much time when you're playing in the SEC. So you can look at it at either way there, but they are relying on, I saw some secondary transfers from Temple and Middle Tennessee State, 2, not really dynamic football programs at the moment. So when those guys transferring up, that's a big step up in competition in football. So big expectations for those guys to step up. Doesn't really sound that promising, but the defensive line is really going to have to get home and make things easier for the linebackers and the secondary. If you're good up front and in the trenches on both sides, you're going to have a chance every single night, but the defensive line might even have to play a little bit over their head. And I saw Tim Banks, their defensive coordinator, said he expects this to be the best defensive line in the country. He's saying that internally about his own team, so certainly he could be a little bit biased there, but there is a lot of expectations, and this should be a really good group on the defensive side of the ball. So definitely a little bit more bullish this year about the offense and the defense, but with the defensive line, they should be able to kind of keep them in games. I'll bring up my schedule predictor now and show my screen for the entire Tennessee schedule for this upcoming season. All right, they started off with Chattanooga week 1. Won't get too much into that one. I'll give them a win there to move to 1-0. Week 2, NC State. This is a neutral site game, even though it's in North Carolina. It's where where the Panthers play. NC State's a team that's getting top 25 buzz as well. So, barring any upsets in week 1, but for NC State or Tennessee, this should be a top 25 game, probably even closer to a top 20 matchup. That's going to be a good one, a close one, but I will give Tennessee the nod there. I think that they have a little bit more firepower on offense. Kent State, one of the worst teams in all of college football, will give them a 3-0 start. Next one, a big game. Josh Heupel, the former quarterback at Oklahoma, the head coach of Tennessee now, travels back to his alma mater. Would be a cool kind of, homecoming win for him, but I am going to give Oklahoma the game there. They're going to want that one. So Tennessee goes to 3-1. Arkansas the next week. Arkansas is a team that I don't really have much expectations for, but I also don't think that they're a Vanderbilt type. I think they're more of kind of a middle tier SEC team that's going to be fighting for bowl eligibility. I'm not probably won't do a whole preview on them throughout this, but I do think this is a year where if Sam Pittman doesn't get to a bowl, he definitely gets fired. Even if he just goes 6-6 in the regular season, he still might get fired. But still early enough in the season. Arkansas, I don't know their schedule off the top of my head, but they might even be undefeated going into that game, depending on who they have before that. But I'm going to give Arkansas the nod there. So Tennessee, after starting out 3-0, is now 3-2. But then Florida comes to town. I'm going to give Tennessee a win in that one. I think a very down year is coming for Florida. Then the stadium's on fire. They're 5-2, or excuse me, 4-2 going into the Alabama game. Not going to be a top 10 matchup with the record like that. Alabama will probably, be undefeated heading into that one. Still, does Alabama have the ability to go in there and beat Tennessee at Rocky Top? I say so as of right now. That would push Tennessee to 4-3, and I think disappointment would be definitely the word to use through those first 7 games if they're sitting there at 4-3. But I do think the schedule gets a little bit easier from there. The Kentucky game, that's a game I'm going to. It's going to be an awesome game, night game. I'm going to give Tennessee the win there. Go to 5-3. Mississippi State, I'm expecting to be bottom of the SEC this year, like a 2-10, 3-9 type squad. I'm going to give Tennessee a win there. 6-3. And then they go to Georgia. That's going to be a really tough one with Nico going to Georgia for the first time. I'm going to give Tennessee a loss there, 6-4. But then end the season with 2 should be really easy games in UTEP and Vanderbilt. So I got 2 wins there to end the season. So you're losing kind of your big games, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, I think, would be a really disappointing loss, but I do think Arkansas finds a way to get that one, and Oklahoma as well. So I'm going to give this Tennessee Vols squad this year an 8-4 record. Like I said, I think if they're anywhere between 8 and 10, I think that the year is viewed as a success and just kind of as a building block year. I think this is an 8-9 win team, and so does Vegas. Vegas has the over-under for them at 8.5 wins. Over is -170, so Vegas actually likes them. They favor them to get at least 9 wins this year. Under is +145. A thing that I'm not going to bet the season win total for this team because I'm kind of right there. I could see it going either way. Definitely leaning under, especially there at plus money. I don't think it's worth it to take 9 wins. Don't think this team is screaming 9-10 wins with their schedule. But at plus money there for the under, it could be a play as we get closer to the season, but there's still a lot of unknowns. Like Nico looked great in that bowl game against Iowa, but that was, a really small sample size and against an Iowa team that kind of ran out of gas by the end of the season, if we're being honest, after that Michigan game as well. So -225 to miss the playoff, +170 to make the playoff. Sorry, that was +170 to make the playoff, +145 for the under 8.5 wins. But -225 to miss, definitely not worth it as well. It's a team that has upside and wouldn't be surprised if they got the 10 wins, but I just don't see it really in the cards this year. I think next year could really be an explosion year for this Tennessee team. 7th best odds to win the SEC at +1,600. But this will be a top 25 team when the poll comes out in just a few days. But that'll do it for the Tennessee Vols. As I said, I'm excited to get down to Rocky Top in November for my first SEC game. Should be an awesome time, and a team I'll be following closely throughout the season. But as always, everyone, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we will talk soon.